If you're working for a great company, there should be no reason to job hop because you're getting the same things that you would get from job hopping. You're getting more opportunity, you're getting fast raises.
It's very possible that someone has 10 years of experience and has the equivalent of 1 year of skill.
The founders need to be involved in the hiring process for as long as possible.
I think if you don't take the time to develop your own taste on that thing, you're going to have someone come in and develop out an engineering organization that you're not happy with.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Rise Over Run podcast. I'm Marino Mendenhall here with my co-founders Doug Barnett, Brant Choate.
Howdy.
Happy
What's
Halloween.
up? Happy Halloween.
How much do you love Halloween? Where does it rank on the favorite holidays for you guys?
I love passing out candy. I sit on my porch and I make kids choose between what they would consider a very good candy choice, like full-size candy bar, or a toy. And watching a 5-year-old reason through that is probably my favorite thing of the year. But I hate dressing up for Halloween.
I wanted to dress up for the podcast, and I said, hey, should we do that? And Doug's like, of course we aren't.
Of course we aren't. Why would we want to memorialize that?
Halloween's fun for my kids. I don't love it as much. You love Halloween.
I don't.
Do you hand out candy, or do you turn off your lights?
The lights are off.
I could totally.
You're the Halloween
I knew that.
Grinch.
I knew that. We hand out, because I hate giving out candy, we hand out big size gum, extra gum. It's different. People like it.
I think once I have like older kids, like the lights will go back on.
It's fun for the kids, but
Yeah.
you've never handed out candy in your adult life.
No, I have. It's just not my choice.
Awesome. Okay, let's get into it. Doug, you went to a cool event in NYC, Art of Hiring, with a couple of your favorite people in business. Tell us a little about that.
So it was hosted by Ramp, and the speakers it was kind of put on by Keith Rabois, who's one of their investors kind of from the beginning. In fact, from the event, you learned that they added Keith to their cap table from Founders Fund, I think was at that time, 45 days into the start of the company. So they always count in days. They're day 2040 on that event. Day 45, they added Keith.
How many employees did they have at day 45 when they added
Not
Keith?
many. Yeah, I think
5?
Yeah,
5 to 10?
Less than that. Keith had been looking for this product, and Delian, his kind of understudy at Founders Fund, found them, and Eric and Kareem are actually second-time founders. They sold a company to American Express, and it was like Keith saw the product and he's like, "We're in. We're funding the seed round." So it was Keith Rabois, Eric Glyman spoke, Mike Shebat, who runs Traba, and then Brian Chesky didn't speak but was interviewed by Keith. I think Ramp and Airbnb are probably, if they're not number 1 and 2 on the companies we admire the most, they're certainly in the top 10 or 5 companies we admire the most, both in the way that they hire, how they think about product, how their leaders lead the company, et cetera. And so it was something that I wanted to attend. It was an excellent event. I think it's now public and fully you can see everything that was said. Probably the 2 things that stuck out to me the most, Keith made a point that an incomplete team is better than a mediocre team. I think on a prior podcast, I think Brant has said like the number 1 kind of mistake people make is just hiring for convenience because it's so hard. It takes so much time.
And the longer it goes, you obviously lower your bar a little bit because you want to fill that position so bad.
Usually when you need to hire, it's like you're desperate to hire someone. And he said, I've just experienced that unless it's not that strategic of a position, I would rather just wait and wait and wait until I find the right person and keep the team incomplete than hire somebody mediocre.
I think it's like almost the fear of what could happen and trying to preempt it and like have the wall built ahead of time before like everyone tries to come attack you. So you want to like fortify, but you bring in all these people with like unclear ideas of what you're even trying to protect against.
But that's so hard because if you have an incomplete team, does he say you move faster if you don't hire that person that you need? Like that's hard to wrap your mind around, especially when you need someone like really bad and you're trying to go as fast as you possibly can as a startup.
connected to that, you know, he kind of asked people in the audience, you raise your hand if hiring is the #1 priority for you. And I don't know, a third of the room raised their hands, probably. And he said, okay, keep your hand raised if it's the thing you spend the most time on. And nobody kept their hands raised. And he's like, this has been my experience across many, many, many companies is it's really difficult to spend the amount of time that you need to spend. And I think that's connected to the problem that you're talking about, which is you're so desperate to just solve the problem. That's why you're making the hire. And so it's compounded not just with the fact that you need a hire, but now you need to take your own time to go find the person to hire. It's double whammy of pain. So that was one of my key takeaways. Another key takeaway, when Keith was interviewing Brian Chesky, Brian said, you know, and he's talked with other very successful founders about this. I think I might be remembering incorrectly because there was a bunch of numbers thrown around, but I think he interviewed the first 800 people at Airbnb. And he said the way to think about this, he says he wished he would have lasted longer doing it. But the way to think about this was when your recruiting team is basically throwing a riot because they can't hire anyone until you give the stamp of approval, and getting on your calendar is so hard and you're just slowing things down so much. He said, when that happens, wait 2 more years and then stop doing it. So it's like at a high level, basically just saying like the founders need to be involved in the hiring process for as long as possible.
And you came in the other day and you said in one of our meetings, you said, and this probably came from that, you said, I want to meet everybody. Like, I think you have met everybody, interviewed everyone to this point.
That is not true.
Or pretty
close. There are 3 people we've hired that I did not.
Or pretty close. You came in the other day, probably reinforced by this, saying, I want to talk to everyone. We've done great hiring with like skills and talent, but I want to make sure people are built for working at Remy, working at a startup. And that's probably kind of where you got that. Or what did you mean by that?
Yeah, this is from Brian's talk as well. I'm just going to read a little bit. He quoted a job posting from Ernest Shackleton, sailor, and he said, this is the job posting that Ernest Shackleton ran in a newspaper to recruit men for the endurance expedition. Men wanted for hazardous journey, low wages, bitter cold, long hours of complete darkness, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in event of success. He said that sometimes what he's found is when the founder lets go of the hiring process, the recruiter tends to lean into like, look at all of our great benefits, look at how nice our office is, and it brings in mentality, the wrong type of person. Versus a founder is gonna sit down and say like, hey, this is gonna be like really intense and not fun all the time. And so my version of that is I talk to, you know, potential people that are gonna come work at Remy and say like, look, the culture that we're trying to build here is a culture that the person sitting next to you intimidates you. Not in a bad way, they're not trying to kill you or like run you out of the place or make it so that you lose your job. But their work is gonna be so high quality that it's gonna literally make you go like, crap, like I've gotta freaking get up and bring it this morning. That is the culture we're trying to create here. A culture of very high quality, a culture where it requires you to focus, it requires you to bring your best to work, because if you don't, you won't keep up. And that is not something that any normal recruiter is going to do, because how are recruiters measured? Well, how many people did we get hired?
Yep.
It's like they're counter incentives. And in some ways, like I want to hire fewer people, especially if they're the wrong people. I don't want to hire anyone. And so keeping connected to the hiring process was like one of the key things I took away.
And Brant, you've probably been in more startups or companies than all of us. How have you seen that play out in other companies? And has other companies done it well, or has that not really been a part of their culture? And have you seen the result from that?
Yeah, I think if you outsource this too much, the recruiter doesn't really have, because it's an art. Like, how many people should we go hire if we had this discussion right now? Like, how many people should we go hire for the next year? Who knows? Like, I think it takes like a gut feeling, basically month over month, at least is how I think about it, based on me trying to condense what's happening across like 10 layers of the business. And it results in me feeling a certain way about how many people we should hire. How can a recruiter do that? I don't think they can have the right context. They don't understand product design engineering. They don't understand sales. They don't understand the conversations that we're having with executives at insurance companies, the solar companies, whatever. All of that funnels down into, you know, how to hire, who we should hire, how many people, all that type of stuff, whether we can really wait or not. If you're in a young company, what you'll see a lot of times is out of fear, a 25-year-old will say, I don't know, I've never scaled out an engineering organization. I better go get my engineering leader and have them kind of figure it out. Well, I think that's almost just as bad. Now, you need people that can like fill in your knowledge gaps and whatnot, but if you're the founder and you're expecting to go hire out like a CTO role, as an example, and bring someone in as like employee 20 and have them then scale out your engineering organization, it's going to lead to a lot of the same inefficiencies, waste, too much. So I've definitely been a part of companies that have done a lot of hiring for the sake of trying to kind of protect the kingdom. And then we all look back in hindsight and it's like, we probably hired twice as many people as we needed.
So Brent, you saw this event online. Did you have any big major takeaways from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the nuance points about craft that Eric made, he tuned into kind of the Jiro Dreams of Sushi movie, is a documentary that got made in 2012, I think. The gist of it is that there's this guy who spent his whole life, and I think he was 80 years old by the time they shot the documentary.
Still alive.
Yeah.
98.
Yeah.
Does he still make sushi?
Every day.
Yep. And so he just has this tiny little shop in Tokyo under like a subway station. I think there's only 10 seats, but the seats now go for thousands of dollars because he has perfected the art of putting fish on top of rice. This is an interesting kind of like topic for me because like if you're like young and you think about eating something like a steak, you start out, you're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna like go to Outback Steakhouse and get a steak. It's pretty good. If you've never had steak, or maybe you've had steak at home or whatever, it's like a tastes pretty good to you. And then you have the experience of kind of like, I don't know, let's say go to like Texas Roadhouse, or you move a notch up. It's like, oh, well, that's better than Outback's. And then you go to like Fleming's or some other place, and you kind of like move up this ladder. And then it can go all the way up to, you know, where you're paying $1,000 for a steak at a
Kobe beef.
Yeah, very expensive restaurant. But at the end of the day, you're putting a slab of meat down into a pan with butter and some herbs in each case. So like, how can it be that different? And if you haven't really like, you know, gone through the process of tasting each step, it's really hard to appreciate the spectrum of, you know, what you're really evaluating there. And I think the same thing happens with building companies, building product. This comes out in design, it comes out in engineering, where if you've done this long enough, someone can say, hey, there's this problem we're gonna go solve. Here's the design. And it has the appearance of solving the problem in like a smart way. But you can kind of look at it, if you've done this long enough, and say like, oh, we're wasting half the screen, or the user is not going to ever see this piece that you've outlined here. Like this text needs to be right next to the button, or we need to like, you know, make sure that the color being used here really represents action that we want to drive. And there's all kinds of nuanced points around ultimately getting your product to do what you want and to do it well and to have people enjoy using it. And I really think that like finding those people that can produce high craft software you have to go through this same journey that I just discussed with food. And it's hard to replace that experience. Like if you don't have anyone in your company that has that experience, it's hard to kind of like manufacture out of nowhere.
But I also think as like a candidate like me looking for a job out of college, I think I started out with my first company as like a Tony Roma's or like an Outback steak to where I started it. I thought it was pretty good, didn't know really what was great. Fortunately ended up at Vivint. And then from there, I think I went straight to the top and got very, very fortunate. A lot of candidates don't, so they never even realize like what is good or what is great. I don't know if you felt the same way about Vivint or if you worked somewhere beforehand to where when you landed at a job, you're like, wow, what I did before, or I realized that I was working at a company that probably wasn't great and I didn't have a lot of future there.
It's interesting because Brant's talking about like you have to, as a hiring manager, you have to be able to develop taste. But the way you develop taste is usually as an employee.
Absolutely.
Which means you have to begin to understand what great looks like both as a contributor, but I think also it flows the other direction, which is also with companies. So in my late 20s, I was working for a company doing from the company's perspective, a very good job. I was highly underpaid. I asked for a raise. They came back and they gave me like a 2.5% raise. And I called my dad. I remember having this conversation. I was like, Dad, I must be doing something wrong. Like I think they're saying I'm doing a good job. The results, the numbers say I'm doing a good job, but they're not willing to pay me for doing a good job. And he just said, Doug, that's not a great company. And I'd never even considered that before. And when I left and went to the next company, which happened to be Vivint, that is what I got the first time an opportunity to see what it meant to work for a company that takes care of their people. And interestingly, I think this is the core problem is why you see people getting advice to job hop every couple years so they can, bump up their pay, get promoted, which are very good things that I'm totally in support of. In fact, this other company, I worked there for 5 years. I should have left earlier, but I shouldn't have left because the strategy of jumping 2 years is super smart. I should have left because the company sucked. And that, I think, is the foundational principle that people need to evaluate. If you're working for a great company, there should be no reason to job hop because you're getting the same things that you would get from job hopping. You're getting more opportunity, you're getting fast raises, etc. And this is, I think, some of the taste that you begin to develop as you become a hiring manager. It's really hard to develop super young in your career when you're just thrown into the deep end of the pool as a hiring manager. It's tough.
And a lot of people right now, just based on statistics, they are not staying at jobs as long as they used to. I think the average tenure at a tech company is 2 years. 2 years. And you talk about job hopping. Someone posted something that said, if I interview you and you have about 6 years, around 6 years in your career, and you haven't stayed at a job close to 2 years, that throws up big red flags for them. Do you agree? Do you disagree? How do you look at that, Brant?
Yeah, I think in most cases it's a red flag. I don't know that I have a 6-year window when I look at it, but if I'm looking at someone's resume and it's 9 months, 12 months, 9 months again, it just says this person doesn't seem to know what they want. And sometimes there's reasons why that's happening. You'll have people going through a rough patch in life. That happened to me a little bit while I was getting divorced. I had, some bouncing around that happened over a year. But yeah, when you're looking at a long stretch of time and it's just, does this person actually know where they're trying to go and how to get there? Well, if they don't, I don't know that I want to be the one to help them figure it out, because most of those people come in, don't figure it out still, and then they blame you for it.
Here's kind of how I look at it, and maybe I come at it from a little different angle, because I was fortunate enough to work at Vivint for pretty much my whole career, minus maybe 1 year in some form or fashion. So I felt like I landed at a great company. But when I see people job hopping, I almost see, to me, I immediately think, that's about how long it takes for them to get exposed, is what I feel. And then once they get exposed, they go to another company to where they can't get exposed again. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. That's initially how I feel about it. How do you look at it, Doug?
Unless there's things like layoffs happening, real personal things that they can really explain through their resume, it's probably some combination of either they're exposed or they were looking the entire time that they were at the other job.
For something better.
Yeah, and like specifically for the purpose of, you know, kind of what I would call their compensation and title and role outpacing their skill. And what, you know, I don't know if the 6-year thing, but what we have found in the hiring process is we'll bring people in, resume even looks good, they've got promoted every time, they've jumped every 18 months, 2 years, get promoted, and we're interviewing them, and there's a certain bar of quality that we have from a technical skill perspective, regardless of what the position is. Let's take marketing in this particular sense. And they're underskilled for the things that they're looking for. Those are the things that I think come out. Either they get exposed or they have pushed themselves to the point where they are now exposed because they're underskilled for the job that they're seeking.
It's very possible, like said another way, that someone has 10 years of experience and has the equivalent of 1 year of skill. And it's very common. And so those are the people that we don't want because they don't give us leverage at all. They're a drain on the company.
If you're looking for a job or you're at a job, you need to evaluate, do I work for a good company? Do these people actually care about me? Do they want to take care of my career? Are they doing right by me every day? Are they providing me with feedback? We've talked about feedback a lot. If those things are true, you know, getting into Brant's point on this, I think what ends up happening is you need to completely shift your focus away from getting promotions, getting raises, to getting skills. And if you are at a great company and you are acquiring skills and leveling up your skill level, all of those things that you want are on the backside of that if you work for a good company. If you don't, leave and go find one. But be picky. Figure out how to identify the companies that are going to do that for you.
And how do you do that though? Because in talking with Mike, who's our VP of marketing, when most candidates look at a company, the only thing they have to go off of is their careers page. And in their careers page, according to Mike, it's like they always show them at an offsite, smiling or playing volleyball or doing something. How can candidates interview companies better? And then flipping on how can companies interview candidates better? So maybe they don't have to do that 2-year hop to where they can actually find a company the first time around and they can actually stay longer. Because it is hard for candidates to find a lot about a company just off someone's career page.
Well, selfishly, come work at Remi.
And what's Remi doing differently?
This is why we do this podcast. The entire reason is to give people an idea of what it's like to work with us. And
initially, to be honest, I was hesitant because I know you guys did this before we all joined. I'm like, do we really need a podcast? Like, so many people have podcasts. What's going to separate Remi's podcast? And if it's only for the fact that it like provides a little bit more transparency to how Remi thinks about things or runs things or gets to know us three a little bit better, every person that I've talked to over the last little bit has always referred back to, hey, I watched all your podcasts. And I actually got a text the other day that I'll share really quick. I interviewed someone that was just a quick introduction who just left a company, super talented. And I don't know if we have a spot for him, but he said he texted after we met and said, Reno, thanks again for being exactly as transparent as your splash page on Remi makes you out to be. Awesome to add you to my network. So if it's just for that, I think it's awesome because if we can help people find what they want, where they want to work, and provide them more transparency, that saves them hopefully a bunch of years of hopping around because they can actually make a good decision the first time.
So I think another thing is the people that already work here also listen to our podcast. And it's been interesting to see them take things that, you know, really are discussion points that we're having here that I think represent principles that are top of mind for us. And then they take those and they apply them to the work. So, you know, if we're having a conversation with engineers and one of our engineering leaders is saying like, guys, you need to be better at storytelling. Like that's the reason you're not being listened to. It's just like little things like that are starting to come through that I think, hopefully does represent us trying to be transparent, whether that's outside of the company or inside.
But if you don't want to work at Remy, there are a few things that you can do to begin to identify like what a great company looks like. One of the reasons that paying attention to an investor, investing in a company matters, is a signal of quality. So, our investor, Tyler Hogue, has a list of exceptional startups. Start there. Like those are what other third parties have nominated those companies as great companies to work for. Start there. Go look at investors that you like or people that you think are smart and go listen to what they've said. There's so much content out there talking about this stuff. Go to YouTube,
From
go
really,
to podcasts.
really smart people.
Yes.
Who dedicate their lives to studying great companies.
Yes, and if you go...
Resources no normal candidate will never have.
If you just take one example, take the Collison brothers, take Patrick and John. Every time I listen to John or Patrick talk, they're talking about a company that they've studied. Like companies that they want to know, like, why did IBM become what they were in like the 80s? And or John interviewing Charlie Munger. And he's like, why did you guys invest in Coca-Cola? Like there's so many places to go learn, but you have to try. You have to go work and do the research. This isn't just great companies will just pop out of nowhere right in your face. You have to go work at it and identify 3 or 4 that you want to go work for. And then some of the best people that we have found network their way into meeting with us. They're really good at it. They'll go talk to people. They'll go find little networks where they've got connections at LinkedIn and like, do you know this person? Can you connect me? I want to go talk to them about what it's like to work at this company.
Well, we hired someone that's starting on Monday that I think talked to probably 10 people, 10 of our employees, including all of us 3. And he reached out via LinkedIn. He used every resource he had and talked to everyone.
Interestingly enough, as we were going through that interview process, I went and talked to the people that he interviewed. I'm like, should we hire this person? And all of them advocated for him because they were impressed by the way that he went about the work of like identifying Remy. So there's ways to do this, but you got to put in the work just like any other way. But I do think all the time that we are spending thinking about how to hire really well, if an employee, a prospective employee, put in that much time thinking about how to identify a great company, you are going to have the best career experience you've ever had, which is like the greatest gift you could ever get because work is such a big part of your life.
So Brent, what does a great career experience look like? Like once you find a great company, how do you continue to grow in your career?
The way I look at it is you have to get real honest with yourself about what you're trying to get out of it. And I think there's many philosophies on this. If you kind of like dig far enough into most career advice, it kind of traces back to like a set of 5 different philosophers from like thousands of years ago in certain cases. And I think most people are unaware that there's these ways of looking at it, and so they argue back and forth with each other. But at the end of the day, it's like, if you're the type of person who is like duty bound and I have to work and I'm just gonna do it and I'm diligent and I have no problem kind of like doing the same thing day after day after day after day, the job opportunities and the things that you're happy doing are gonna be much different than if maybe you're more of like an artistic type and the routine really drives you crazy. So for me, I'm probably more on like the artistic side of things, and routine gets me like depressed. And so I got to a point in my career where it's like, I need to do something that has enough variation and change that it's going to be interesting and exciting. And I like the idea of the unknown and kind of a new challenge every day and like competing against myself. So putting that against, then what can I actually do? Starting companies, being a founder, being a part of startups was like the clear path. So then it's like, okay, well, how do I get into startups? What skills are valuable to startups? Design, product, engineering. I got good at all of those things and just kind of like worked my way into startup after startup, and then eventually you know, founding companies.
For me, the key point about that Brant made around identifying like what made him happy as a person was connected into the things that were going to make him wake up on a Monday morning excited to go to work. And I think a lot of people, the way they think about this is like, okay, I will now graduate from high school, and then I will go and I will attend college, and I will go to biology and American Heritage, and I will get through my generals, and once I do that, I will then pick a vocation in which I will dedicate my life. And then once I pick that vocation, I will dedicate my studies and I will graduate with honors. And after I graduate with honors, there will be a leader in a company who will select me amongst many. And when they select me, they will provide with me an exact path that was given me in high school and college to my next step. And when I get to that next step, I will be proud. And like to the next, it's almost like this like linear path that just doesn't exist. And if you listen to Brant talk about the discovery about how he could find happiness at work, it had nothing to do with external things impacting him and all about him. What brings me joy? What makes me excited? What gets me to compete against myself? And when you find the intrinsic motivation, you build skill and you get better and things start happening for you. And what we have seen a lot is people expect external things to act upon them and then give them the next thing that they're looking for from their career, rather than having it come from here and then them identifying what's going to bring them joy, what's going to get them excited. Because when those things are true, what happens to your work? It's awesome, usually. You're proud of it. You're excited to show it. Things like that. And I think it's one of the biggest mistakes people make. And so as you are identifying the type of work that you want to do, it's way more tied into principles, not specific work. As an example, design, product, and engineering that Brant just talked about are three completely different vocations. Completely different. Like they have no resemblance to one another.
Very few people are good at all of them, is what I'm finding out.
But even the type of work that you do inside of it, you could have three completely different people succeed in each one of those jobs. And identifying, you need to go through the experience of doing work to identify, does this make me excited to work on? And I'm actually very similar to Brant in that I have to have autonomy in my job or I'm miserable. If I've got somebody, and I want variation, and I want to work at the beginning of the process rather than the end. Usually, that is where I am at my best. I had to learn that about myself. By the way, none of those things have anything to do with a specific job. That could have been true in accounting, it could have been true in finance, it could have been true in operations, could have been true in sales. You have to identify the things, the attributes about work that bring you joy, and when you do that, I think the career pathing begins to get simpler for you.
Obviously, there's no like one answer fits all, but I think for me, I learned a lot about what makes you happy, if you're good at something, how to choose your career path. I thought that was a great conversation. So appreciate you guys being here. Thanks for hopping on.
See ya.
See ya.